They say every soldier fears the weapon he can't escape. And in World War II, German troops learned to fear a sound that didn't just echo across the battlefield, it tore through it. While the Allies cursed the German MG-42 for its terrifying buzzsaw rate of fire, the Germans had a different nightmare: the deep-throated roar of the American M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun, a weapon they nicknamed the meat chopper. A weapon so powerful that if a round touched a wall, it shredded it. If it touched steel, it punched through it. And if it touched a soldier, well, let's just say the Geneva myth didn't appear out of nowhere. Yet this brutal legend didn't begin with visions of carnage. It began with a question asked at the end of World War I. How do you stop tanks and armored aircraft when rifle bullets bounce off like rain on iron? The answer would give birth to a weapon so devastating, so reliable, and so enduring that a century later, modern armies still rely on it. To understand how America created Deuce, the mother of machine guns, we need to go back to trenches choked with smoke, to the first tanks crawling across the mud, and to a general who demanded a bullet twice as big and far more deadly than anything that had ever existed before. World War I ended with a brutal lesson carved into steel and mud. The battlefield was evolving faster than the weapons meant to fight on it. Machine guns had proven their worth, but they all shared a limitation. They fired the same ammunition as infantry rifles. And as those first armored beasts rolled across the torn earth and primitive planes buzzed overhead, it became painfully clear that rifle-caliber rounds were no longer enough. Bullets that once dominated the battlefield now flattened against tank plates like raindrops against iron. Aircraft, crude but growing stronger each year, shrugged off small arms fire and kept coming. General John "Black Jack" Pershing, who had commanded American forces in Europe, saw the future forming before anyone else. He understood that wars would no longer be won with bullets designed for flesh. They needed rounds designed for armor. Pershing demanded a new machine gun, one powerful enough to rip through metal, ignite fuel tanks, and tear down the flying machines that would soon rule warfare. That request would change weapons history forever. It would spark the development of a round twice the size of the infantry cartridge and a machine gun designed not just to kill enemies, but to destroy the machines of war themselves. And the man chosen to bring this idea to life was already a legend: John Moses Browning. John Moses Browning was not just a gun designer. He was the architect of American firepower. By the time Pershing's request reached him, he had already given the U.S. Army masterpiece after masterpiece. But this challenge was different. The demand wasn't simply for a stronger firearm. It was for a weapon that could shape the future of warfare. Browning studied the problem the same way he approached every mechanical puzzle. Not as an engineer bragging about complexity, but as a craftsman obsessed with reliability. He took his trusted M19 1730 caliber water-cooled machine gun and began scaling it up, piece by piece, reshaping steel and physics at the same time. The result was a monster of a cartridge, a half-inch diameter bullet, longer, heavier, and designed to leave the barrel at over 2,700 feet per second. It was inspired partly by America's own .30-06, partly by captured German 13.2mm anti-tank ammunition, and entirely by necessity. This new cartridge, the 50 Browning machine gun round, 12.7 by 99mm, wasn't meant just to wound. It was designed to penetrate steel plates, smash aircraft engines, and turn early tanks into burning wrecks. Browning didn't yet know it, but he had just created one of the most feared and respected cartridges in military history. And soon, it would need a weapon strong enough to fire it. With the new cartridge born, Browning moved to build the machine gun that could unleash it. It began as a simple idea: scale up his reliable M1917. But reality struck hard. This wasn't just a bigger bullet, it was a battlefield sledgehammer. And engineering a weapon to contain that power meant stepping into unknown territory. In 1921, after relentless prototyping and testing, the first weapon emerged: the M1921 50 cal machine gun. Water-cooled, heavy, and brutally strong, it was intended primarily for anti-aircraft use. Early trials showed raw promise, but this beast came at a cost. The gun alone weighed around 120 pounds in water-cooled form and nearly 84 pounds air-cooled. Add a tripod and the system ballooned to between 130 and 170 pounds before counting ammunition, which was hardly light. Infantrymen could barely drag it. Smaller aircraft of the time struggled with their size and recoil. Vehicle mounts worked, but only on platforms strong enough to handle their punishment. And another problem lurked: it could only feed from one side, limiting turret and vehicle flexibility. Many in the Army questioned whether this weapon had a future. It seemed so powerful that no one quite knew what to do with it. Yet beneath those doubts was a truth the world would soon discover. Wars were changing, machines were rising, and the battlefield would soon belong to whoever controlled the skies, and whoever could tear steel apart with thunder. Browning was not finished. After his passing in 1926, his design would continue to evolve, and soon the legendary name M2 would appear. The M1921 had proved one thing beyond doubt. The idea was right, even if the first form wasn't. But innovation doesn't stop because a design is imperfect. Browning passed away in 1926, yet his work lived on, and a generation of engineers continued refining his vision. They reworked the internals, redesigned the receiver, and made a crucial change: the ability to feed ammunition from either side. That single improvement transformed the gun's future. Suddenly, it could fit into aircraft wing mounts, tank turrets, vehicle panels, and naval stations with ease. A universal receiver was created, able to accept water-cooled or air-cooled barrels, giving commanders flexibility based on their mission: aircraft mounts, ground positions, or anti-aircraft platforms. Piece by piece, the weapon shed its clumsy beginnings and hardened into a design ready for war. When the U.S. military approved the new model, it earned a new name: the M2 Browning. Soldiers would soon give it an even stronger one, Deuce, born from mother and Deuce, meaning simply two. They didn't know it yet, but they were holding the machine gun that would change the way armies fought. When World War II erupted, the M2 Browning didn't just enter the battlefield, it took command of the sky. Lightweight barrels and boosted fire rates transformed it into aviation's perfect predator. Aircraft engineers tuned it from roughly 500 rounds per minute to over 1,200 for short, furious bursts. You didn't need long streams of fire when your enemy was only in your sights for seconds. This wasn't just a gun, it was a storm. American warplanes bristled with them. The B-17 Flying Fortress carried up to 13 M2s, turning the bomber into a flying porcupine of lead and fury. The P-47 Thunderbolt strapped on 8 of them, 4 in each wing, shredding trains, convoys, and armored vehicles from above. And then there was the Douglas A-26 Invader, which took the idea further than anyone thought possible. 8 Brownings packed into its nose, 4 in each wing, and 2 more in its turret. 18 guns, unleashing a wall of fire so intense that tanks, locomotives, and bunkers simply disintegrated under its attack. The result was devastating air superiority. With every pull of the trigger, the M2 tore engines apart, ignited fuel tanks, and shredded wings mid-air. German pilots learned quickly diving onto a formation of American bombers meant flying into a swarm of 50 caliber fire, a storm that could rip a fighter apart before it ever fired a shot. The sky had a new king, and its crown was forged from Browning steel. While the M2 ruled the skies, its rampage on the ground was just beginning. As America mobilized, the 50 cal Browning found a home on jeeps, half-tracks, tanks, command vehicles, and infantry tripods. Anything that could carry its weight and survive its recoil. Suddenly, the battlefield felt different. It wasn't just rifles and light machine guns, it was thunder, mounted on wheels and armor. On tanks, the M2 became standard, perched on turrets, ready to punish enemy infantry, shred trucks, tear through lightly armored vehicles, and even threaten the sides and backs of mid-war tanks like the Panzer IV. Jeep crews loved it because it made their small vehicle punch like a giant. Infantry platoons dragged tripods into position when fire superiority mattered most. And when American planes strafed enemy columns, the same .50s mounted on wings tore open locomotives, smashed armored cars, and penetrated thin top armor on tanks that once felt invincible. By 1945, millions of M2s rolled out of American factories. Germany, already strained by shortages, watched with growing dread as Allied columns rolled forward, and every silhouette seemed to carry that same familiar shape of steel and blackened barrel. Dive bombers like the Stuka, once feared across Europe, now faced a grim reality as they swooped low. Nearly every American vehicle could fire back, and often with enough power to rip wings clean off or send them smoking into the ground. The battlefield was no longer a place where you could hide behind armor or altitude. If a 50 found you, escape was no longer guaranteed. For all its destructive power, the genius of the M2 wasn't just what it fired, it was how it fired. Browning didn't rely on brute force alone. He engineered a mechanism that harnessed recoil, controlled chaos, and turned raw energy into relentless rhythm. The M2 operates on a short recoil principle. When the trigger is pulled, the barrel and bolt are locked together, and they slam backward as one, pushed by the explosive force of that massive 50 caliber round firing at nearly 3,000 feet per second. Only after traveling a short distance do they separate, the barrel halting, the bolt continuing rearward. That slight delay gives the cartridge case just enough time to cool and shrink, preventing ruptures and jams under extreme pressure. The spent casing flies out, the recoil spring drives the bolt forward again, and a fresh round is fed, chambered, and fired the moment the bolt locks into place. As long as the trigger stays down, the cycle repeats. Fast, violent, and unstoppable. It's a symphony of steel and momentum, perfected a century ago. No gas systems, no fragile parts, just Browning's pure mechanical logic, reliable in jungles, deserts, frozen airfields, ship decks, and tank turrets. Soldiers trusted it not because it looked intimidating, but because even in mud, sand, and chaos, it just kept firing. In war, reliability isn't convenience, it's survival, and the M2 earned its reputation not by roaring the loudest, but by never quitting. To American troops, the M2 was a guardian angel, a weapon that could halt a charge, swat down aircraft, and shred armored vehicles. To German soldiers, it was something else, a nightmare they could hear before they ever saw it. The MG-42 may have terrified Allied infantry with its blistering 1,200 rounds per minute scream, but the 50 brought terror of a different kind. A deep, thunderous roar that promised not suppression, but obliteration. Concrete walls, shredded, brick buildings, collapsed, sandbag fortifications, buried the men behind them. Even the side armor of a Panzertaur could be pierced, optics shattered, and tracks disabled. Light Japanese tanks in the Pacific didn't stand a chance. Whole banzai charges were beaten back by 50 caliber fire alone. And so the Germans adapted. Direct assaults shifted to sniper fire, mortars, and armor. Anything to eliminate 50 crews before they opened fire. The weapon became such a symbol of devastation that a myth spread that the 50 BMG was banned by the Geneva Conventions for use against personnel. It wasn't true, but the devastation it caused to the human body made the rumor believable enough to live on. German naval crews even mounted captured M2s on U-boats when surfacing, and German industry produced its own copies of 50 BMG rounds, proof of respect earned through fear. In war, respect isn't spoken, it's felt, and every soldier who faced Deuce understood one truth. If a 50-round touched you, you weren't getting back up. The power of the M2 wasn't just in the gun, it lived inside each massive 50 BMG cartridge. Soldiers quickly learned that this wasn't one bullet, but an entire family of ammunition built for different kinds of destruction. The standard ball round alone is hit with 5 to 10 times the energy of typical infantry ammunition, punching through walls, engines, and steel plates with terrifying force. But then came the specialized rounds, armor-piercing shells designed to drill through hardened steel, incendiary bullets meant to ignite fuel tanks and aircraft, armor-piercing incendiary tracers that punched, burned, and illuminated targets all at once. Aircraft belts mixed these rounds in methodical order, AP, incendiary, tracer, turning every burst into a streaking, flaming sledgehammer. On the ground, Every fifth round glowed in flight, marking the path of devastation and guiding corrections to make sure no enemy escaped. After the war, engineers pushed the envelope further. The Raufoss multipurpose round combined tungsten penetrators, explosives, and incendiary compounds into one terrifying package, a miniaturized cannon shell. And the Slap round, a saboted tungsten penetrator, made a 50 cal sniper rifle capable of punching through armor that once laughed at small arms fire. The message behind every variant was simple: whatever threat appeared, steel, aircraft, concrete, or flesh, there was a 50-round designed to erase it. The gun didn't just adapt to war, it shaped it. If one .50 caliber Browning could change the direction of a battle, what could 4 do? The answer arrived in the form of the M45 quad mount. 4 M2 Brownings bolted together, electrically traversed, and aimed at anything foolish enough to enter their sights. Originally designed to tear apart low-flying aircraft, the Quad 50 became a moving wall of fire. At full roar, nearly 40 rounds per second screamed from its barrels, a storm of metal capable of stripping wings, ripping through truck convoys, and clearing entire tree lines. During the later stages of World War II, as Allied forces gained dominance in the air, crews discovered something chilling. This anti-aircraft monster was just as effective, perhaps even more terrifying, against ground targets. German infantry caught in its path didn't merely retreat, they disappeared. The Quad 50 rolled into Korea and Vietnam, where it guarded convoys, obliterated ambushes, and rained hell on enemy positions hidden in jungle shadows. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't subtle. It was an overwhelming force unleashed without hesitation. The purest expression of Ma Deuce's battlefield dominance. And it proved a lesson as old as war itself. When you have a weapon that terrifies your enemy, doubling down isn't enough. Sometimes you quadruple it. Most weapons rise, peak, and fade into museums. But the M2 Browning refused to follow history's script. After World War II, it fought on frozen hills in Korea, where its rounds shattered charging waves of enemy armor and infantry. In Vietnam, mounted on patrol boats, trucks, and helicopters, it chewed through jungle ambushes and tore enemy bunkers apart. And even as technology raced forward, something remarkable happened. The M2 didn't become outdated. It evolved. Engineers refined its internals, improved its barrel change system, and gave it a flash suppressor and manual safety in the M2A1 upgrade. Remote weapon stations arrived, allowing gunners to fire safely from inside armored vehicles, no longer forced to stand exposed atop a turret under sniper fire. Thermal optics, laser rangefinders, digital fire control, all modern tools grafted onto a weapon whose heart was forged when soldiers still rode horses into battle. Nations around the world adopted it. Special forces still swear by its reach and power. Armored vehicles still roll into combat with one mounted proudly on top. A century has passed since Browning drew the first lines of its design, yet no replacement has dethroned it. Most weapons serve a moment. The M2 created an era and still rules it. For the men who fired it, the M2 was more than a machine. It was a living force. Every trigger pull came with responsibility, and every burst announced to friend and foe alike that thunder had arrived. Tank commanders climbed out of steel armor and stood exposed behind the gun, knowing a sniper's bullet hunted them the moment they touched the grips. Infantry crews hauled its heavy frame through mud and rubble because they knew when the 50 spoke, the battlefield listened. Veterans remembered the sound, a deep, chest-shaking crack that rolled across hills and cities, echoing like cannon fire. They remembered the recoil, the fear of jams in the worst moments, the smell of hot oil and burning cordite, and the weight of ammo belts slung across their shoulders like coiled snakes. And they remembered what it did to the enemy. Some said you could see fear in the eyes of opposing soldiers the moment they heard it open up. Others recalled the quiet after a firefight, spent brass scattered under their boots, knowing that this weapon, this Ma Deuce, had made the difference between walking away and being carried away. Respect wasn't taught. It was earned, fire by fire, war by war. From muddy trenches and fragile biplanes to modern armored convoys rolling through hostile streets, the M2 Browning has witnessed every chapter of modern warfare. It began as a desperate answer to a battlefield problem no one had solved: how to stop steel, how to destroy machines, how to dominate the sky and survive the ground. What followed wasn't just a weapon, but a legacy. A machine gun so reliable, so adaptable, and so devastating that even 100 years later, armies still build tactics around its voice. Pilots trusted it to protect their wings. Tank crews relied on its strength when steel clashed with steel. Infantry prayed it was on their side when the horizon flashed and the air filled with fire. The Germans had machine guns that screamed like buzzsaws, but the Americans had something deeper. A weapon that didn't just suppress the enemy. It erased their cover, cracked their armor, and shattered their will. Time has marched forward. Technology has transformed battlefields, and yet Deuce stands tall. Not as a relic, but as a ruler. A reminder that some engineering isn't meant for a moment, but for history. Forged by John Browning, demanded by a changing world, and proven in the fiercest storms of war, the M2 remains what soldiers always knew it to be: the mother of machine guns.